Hello, here for this week's episode. Hope you're doing well. This is part 2. We are in the 3rd week of February, and I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to go through some heavier issues following part 1 of this week. I would like to do the candy rundown. 5 and Below is definitely in. I went in, they've got tons of Easter candy. I would also like to recommend, if you're somebody who is watching your health, or like me, can't have sugar all the time, I've been doing a lot of fun with frozen fruit. Like, just get a bag of frozen fruit, dump it in a big, like one of these, and then you just let it sit. You can make like a slushy out of it. It's really healthy. It's way better than eating a bunch of candy. But just, I checked out 5 Below. They got tons of candy, and they've got the bunnies. I went yesterday and had a really fun little chocolate Rice Krispie bunny for Mardi Gras. So that was my big thing yesterday. I really enjoyed eating that Rice Krispie bunny. And I went to 5 Below and saw they had white chocolate bunnies too. If a milk chocolate version was enough. But anyways, so we're going to do a history lesson today. We're going to talk about rivers. I grew up in a town on the Mississippi River, Dubuque, Iowa, and there's some history there that I actually was able to share with the U.S. government once I got to the D.C. area, but it took a really long time to get there. And through 19 years of living in the area and long investigations, it was really difficult. And I actually had to fight to get them done right. And I think there's a lot that's still going on. But what I shared with them is that at the time I lived in Iowa, I was known for being on the river. And notably, allowed Russian submarines, freshwater submarines that had come up the river to dock there, and allowed Russians to enter the U.S. And this was back in the 1980s. It's not something that's been widely talked about or even written about. I don't know, maybe I should write a history book on it at this point. Because what I lived through is pretty crazy there. And it's notable that Wisconsin and Illinois, both in that area, that tri-area of states, did not allow Russian ships to dock there. But when I was a child, there was actually a Russian submarine still submerged in the water, docked in Dubuque, Iowa. And I actually had professors who told me, later they said this is just craziness, something's got to be done. I was in college. This is like up a little bit further north at Luther College, who were basically just trapped dealing with their own trafficking situations at Luther College. But Luther College was a place where the Shining Path out of Peru had a presence. Frankly, they had a presence in Iowa, all over the place, and it was all related to Russian activity. And just so we're really clear on this, the states have some rights with their coasts, and Iowa and Missouri were the 2 states that chose to allow Russia to dock and invade during the 80s, during what was still considered the Cold War. And the way those states conduct themselves, it really shows. Because while there was some activity in Wisconsin and some in Illinois, there's nothing like what went on in Iowa. What is Iowa the center of in the U.S.? Methamphetamines. Mason City, Iowa, capital of meth production in the U.S. It's not an accident. What does Iowa also have a problem with? Illegal immigrants that are actually slaves being used for labor trafficking. What does it also have a hugely weird problem with? Children being abused, massively abused by cult groups that are primarily Russian, but also extend to other Russian countries or countries that are, Russian influenced, what I'm saying? And Peru happens to be one of those. And, you can start to line up with some of the companies and the businesses, whatever, we can put the whole together, but this is to be a shorter show than I'm going to bother with filling that out, because I'm going to fill it out later, and you have to be smart enough to follow it all. You also have to keep my talking speed. So, the point about all of this is that, with rivers, the work of Mark Twain, because I'm going to come back to Mark Twain here, we're going to talk about rivers. The Mississippi is very murky. There's a dessert named after it, Mississippi Mud Pie, because it's clear as mud. And he was a counterterrorism specialist. He worked on the riverboats. Remote gambling, right? Like you also see in Missouri and other parts of the river, but not quite as bad as you see in Missouri and Iowa. Not quite as dramatic. Remember, there was mafia in Dubuque, Iowa, too, back in the day, like in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 10s. And frankly, a long history of Russian activity on the Mississippi River. Mark Twain was a counterterrorism specialist. Before there was even such a term, he was a longshoreman, and his job was to check to make sure that the riverboats didn't come in too close to shore, because the riverboat, paddle on the back, extended into the water far deeper than could be seen. And if you didn't check the bottom for the boat, because he was a longshoreman, right? Mark Twain, that's 20 feet. It's not his actual name. His real name is Samuel Clemens. People who criticize the work of Mark Twain, oftentimes, if you dig far enough, you'll find out that there are actually people who are connected to what? The Shining Path, Russia, fans of drug dealing, and human trafficking, and frankly, people who would bring back slavery in the U.S. And as Mark Twain used to often say, he said there's only so much he could talk about, because if he went any closer in, the whole ship would go down. And it was a way of playing off of the term and the title of, his name and frankly, the titles of a lot of his works. And I've always thought it was really interesting to see who accepted his works and who criticized them, because when I started researching why, it was always tied back to the fact that they were angry about him actually broaching those topics. And it's sad that even today people still can't talk about things as much as you would hope they would because of the danger it's involved. Now, what do you also know about the Mississippi? Well, it has a lot of tributaries, right? Follow the tributaries, you'll find crime all over the U.S. Those rivers, water, ports, port cities, that's where your crime generally happens because ships can be used for shipping goods, and those goods can be people, and they can be drugs, and they can be events, and they can be all kinds of things. And they can be, food is a huge motivator for people, and it actually encourages crime sometimes. I remember growing up in Iowa, there was a guy that was just horribly disgusting. He said to me that he ate all the time. He was perfectly well fed. Some of us were starving, and he used to talk about how he just wanted more food. And he said there was plenty of food around. I said, I don't get it. Like, there's less food around here. He's like, yeah, there's less food around here. We don't get it. So what'd you do if you got more money for food? He said, well, you buy more junk food. It was just sick. It was just disgusting. And it wasn't something that made me incredibly sympathetic to him or some of the people there, because it seemed like there was an attitude of being willing to just sell out the country to Russia. And there were frankly women that I knew who were supposed to be teachers in the schools that openly talked about actually being the ones to open Russians in. They were actually going at night and welcoming them in, the Russian military, on the shores of the Mississippi. Not happening in Wisconsin, not happening in Illinois. Also a problem in Missouri. The states that participated in this during those years and allowed what was basically an undiscussed invasion to happen, it makes me sick. I'll never go back to Iowa. I hate the state. And I hated Luther College. Luther College, there's the presence, the shine path there. I hate it. Just hate it. I'm actually sad that I even have a degree from there this day. But, what can you do? That's life. But I just want to make that clear because the school turned out to be so much worse than I ever thought. Now, look down at South America for a second and look at the Amazon River Basin. What do you see with the Amazon? Because when it gets worse, right? It's way more dramatic because you see all these different tributaries. You can start lining them up by countries and regions. And then when those countries and regions all line up, you can actually line up like what? Slavery and drugs by the tributaries to the Amazon. And why is that important? Well, probably because it's not really discussed that often. Who's the #1 producer of cocaine in the world? Peru. It's Peru. Yeah. Also a site where there's a huge amount of labor trafficking and slavery. And frankly, people who were brought as slaves up here. And where do a lot of them go? Oh, I guess a lot of them actually end up in Iowa. And it's one of the places are tributaries to Mississippi. It's not an accident. Not an accident. Anyways, I wish I had like some super uplifting message for this week. But for me, I just literally, all this stuff always ties back to Russian behavior. And it goes back so much longer than most people realize. It's kind of sad that it's all been like kind of lost and not connected as a thread. And there's a reason for that, because there were just far too many people who are Russian assets working in the U.S. government at the federal level that were suppressing information. It's been a really long process. And you're almost looking at like two different competing worldviews. It's almost like two different theories, and you'd think they both came out of like Europe, but they really didn't. And frankly, it ties into Nazism as well. Nazis, sorry. You always find slaves, drugs, and the occult, and cults all together in those groups. So in the Islam, that's a problem with all those issues. Same thing on the Mississippi in the U.S. I know it's worse in certain states, showing how those states are. I'm not trying to press people. I just want you to be aware of what the current issues are and how all this stuff kind of works together, And I say this because some of the stuff like makes its way into modern day life, like, I'll run into whack job medical theories or, pseudoscience where they tell people they don't have pain. You run into a practitioner who wants to say you don't have pain after you've been injured. Maybe you've been injured in a really serious event. Yeah, you need to get away from that person, because that's somebody who's mentally ill and dangerous, and maybe even worse, or like working for the labor traffickers. Might be tied to Russian activity in this country. You never know. Whatever it is, they're not good for you. So don't trust anybody who wants to tell you that you don't have an injury or an issue, or wants you to be like oppressed on how you feel, or just plain old gaslights you on anything. Because my experience was that you think they're just crazy, and they probably are. That's how they should be treated. But more than likely, you're gonna find there's something a lot nastier there that's not worth your time. I'm gonna get away from it. So, and I can say that from life experience. Anyway, so today I'm going to sing Journey's "Don't Stop Believin" because I love the song. It's like one of my favorites. It's from the 80s. So, just a small town girl living in a lonely world. She took the midnight train going anywhere. Just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit. He took the midnight train going anywhere. A singer in a smoky room, a smell of wine and cheap perfume. For a smile they can share the night. It goes on and on and on and on. Strangers waiting up and down the boulevard. Shadows searching in the night. Street lights, people living just to find emotion, hiding somewhere in the night. Working hard to get my fill. Everybody wants a thrill. Even anything to roll the dice just one more time. Some will win, some will lose. Some are born to sing the blues. Well, the movie never ends. It goes on and on and on and on. Strangers waiting up and down the boulevard. Shadows searching in the night. Street lights, people living just to find emotion, hiding somewhere in the night. Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling. Street lights, people. Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling. Street lights, people. Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling. Street lights, people. And that's done. That's all for today's episode and the 2-part hitter this week. So keep it up, and I hope you'll be back next time. There'll be more episodes.